Lisa sat at a small corner table in a bustling cafe, her fingers wrapped around a cup of cheap coffee. It was her one small indulgence, a rare moment of quiet before heading to her second job. The cafe smelled of fresh bread and roasted beans, a warmth that contrasted with the weight in her chest. Across from her, her 5-year-old daughter Emma swung her legs back and forth, flipping through a picture book. She didn't know her mother's exhaustion. She didn't understand the bills piling up, the rent past due, or the fear Lisa carried every single day. Lisa was determined to keep it that way. Her phone buzzed. She hesitated before answering. The landlord. Her heart sank. "Lisa," the voice on the other end sighed. "Rent's late again." "I know, Mr. Daniels," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "I just need a little more time. I promise I'll have it by the end of the week." "You said that last week." Lisa closed her eyes. "I'll figure it out." She ended the call, forcing a smile for Emma's sake. She didn't notice the man at the next table watching, quietly listening. Lisa set her phone down with a shaky sigh, pressing her fingers against her temples. Another deadline, another promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Across the table, Emma looked up from her book. "Mommy, can I have one of those chocolate muffins?" She pointed toward the bakery counter, her eyes bright with hope. Lisa's chest tightened. She hated this part the most, telling her little girl no, making her feel like they couldn't have even the smallest treats. "Not today, sweetheart," Lisa said softly. "Maybe next time." Emma didn't argue. She just nodded, her little hands folding in her lap. That was the worst part. She was too used to disappointment. A few tables away, a man in a crisp suit watched the exchange. He had noticed Lisa the moment she walked in. Her tired eyes, her forced smile, the way she carried herself like the world was pressing down on her shoulders. He had heard the phone call, the stress in her voice, and now, watching her daughter quietly accept another sacrifice, something in him shifted. Without a word, he gestured to a waiter. "Bring the little girl a chocolate muffin," he said, "and don't tell her who paid." A few moments later, the waiter approached their table, placing a muffin in front of Emma. The little girl's eyes widened. "Mommy, look." Lisa frowned. I didn't order this." "The gentleman over there wanted you to have it," the waiter said with a small smile, nodding toward the sweeted man. Lisa turned, her eyes meeting his for the first time. He smiled warmly, nodding in return. She hesitated, then whispered, "Thank you." The man simply sipped his coffee, as if nothing had happened. Emma picked up the muffin carefully, as if it might disappear. She looked at Lisa, waiting for permission. Lisa forced a smile. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Emma grinned and took a big bite, humming in happiness. Lisa watched her, emotions twisting inside her. She should have been the one to buy her daughter a simple treat. She hated relying on the kindness of strangers. Still, she turned back to the man who had done this for them. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes. His suit was expensive, but he didn't carry himself with arrogance. There was something calm about him. She hesitated before speaking. "That was very kind of you, but you didn't have to." The man set his cup down. "Maybe I didn't, but I wanted to." Lisa wasn't sure how to respond. She didn't like charity, but something about the way he spoke, as if this was the most natural thing in the world, made it hard to be defensive. "You seem like a good mother," the man added, "a strong one." Lisa let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "I don't always feel that way." He studied her for a moment. "It's not about how you feel. It's about what you do." His words sank deep. Before she could reply, Emma finished her muffin and wiped her hands on her napkin. "Mommy, that was the best muffin ever." Lisa chuckled and brushed a crumb from Emma's cheek. The man watched them, something thoughtful in his gaze. He had only meant to offer a small kindness. But now, he wanted to know more. Lisa glanced at the man again. There was something about him, something steady, reassuring. She didn't usually open up to strangers, but for some reason, she found herself speaking. "It's been a tough few years," she admitted. "Ever since Emma's father left, it's just been the two of us." The man nodded, listening intently. "I work 2 jobs," Lisa continued. "A cashier at a grocery store during the day, and a waitress at night. Even then, it barely covers rent and daycare. I try to save, but something always comes up. The car breaks down, the bills pile up, it never stops." She didn't know why she was telling him all this. Maybe because he didn't interrupt. Maybe because he didn't pity her. he just listened. "What would you do if things were different?" he asked after a moment. Lisa hesitated. No one had ever asked her that. "I don't know," she admitted. Then, quietly, she said, "I've always dreamed of opening a bakery. Nothing fancy, just a little shop with fresh bread, warm pastries, a place where people feel at home." She laughed, shaking her head. "But that's impossible. Dreams don't pay rent." The man didn't laugh, he just watched her, considering. "Why do you think it's impossible?" he asked. Lisa blinked. "Because I don't have the money, the time, the resources. I can barely afford groceries, let alone a business." The man nodded, taking in her words. Then, as if making a decision, he leaned forward slightly. "What if I told you," he said, "that sometimes the right person just needs a chance?" Lisa frowned, unsure what he meant, but something about the way he said it made her heart beat faster. Lisa stared at the man, unsure how to respond. His words lingered in her mind. A chance? What did that mean? Before she could ask, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small business card. He slid it across the table. "My name is James Carter," he said. "I'd like to invite you and Emma to lunch tomorrow. No pressure. Just a conversation." Lisa hesitated before picking up the card. The name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. She glanced at the fine print, something about investments, business development. She shook her head. "Why? I don't understand." James smiled. "Because I believe in hard-working people, and I think you're one of them." Lisa let out a small laugh, shaking her head. This doesn't happen in real life. Strangers don't just invite struggling moms to lunch." Emma, oblivious to Lisa's doubts, tugged on her sleeve. "Can we go, Mommy? Please?" Lisa looked down at her daughter. The excitement in her eyes was rare. Emma deserved something good. Still, she hesitated. Was this some kind of trick? A joke? James seemed to read her mind. "You don't have to say yes, just think about it." Lisa bit her lip. Every instinct told her to walk away. She had spent years being careful, not trusting too easily. But another part of her, the part that still dared to hope, whispered, "What if this is real?" Finally, she exhaled and nodded. "Okay, we'll meet you for lunch." James smiled. "Good. I'll see you tomorrow." As Lisa tucked the business card into her purse, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change. The next day, Lisa stood outside an upscale restaurant, her hands gripping Emma's shoulders. She had barely slept the night before, torn between excitement and fear. "This is a bad idea," she muttered under her breath. Emma, dressed in her best, though slightly worn dress, beamed up at her. "Mommy, don't be nervous. Mr. Carter was nice." Lisa sighed. Maybe too nice. People like him didn't just help people like her. Still, she took a deep breath and walked in. A host greeted them, immediately recognizing James Carter's name. "Right this way." Lisa followed, glancing around nervously. The place was elegant, white tablecloths, sparkling chandeliers, waiters in crisp uniforms. She felt out of place. James stood when he saw them, smiling warmly. "Lisa." "Emma, glad you came." Emma grinned. "Hi, Mr. Carter." Lisa forced a polite smile. "I don't have much time, I have work soon." James nodded. "I won't waste it." After they ordered, James leaned forward. "I won't dance around it, Lisa. I own several businesses. I invest in people, not just companies." Lisa tensed. And I think you deserve a chance," he said simply. Lisa frowned. "A chance for what?" James took a sip of water. "To own a bakery." Lisa blinked. "What?" "I have a small bakery that isn't doing well," James explained. "The owner is retiring, and I need someone passionate to run it. You love baking, you're hardworking, I think you'd be perfect." Lisa laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "You want me to run a bakery? Just like that?" James smiled. "Not just like that, you'll have to work for it. I'll cover the startup costs. If you make it successful, it'll be yours." Lisa's heart pounded. This was insane. No one gave out opportunities like this. "What if I fail?" she whispered. James shrugged. "Then at least you tried, but I don't think you will." Lisa stared at him, emotions battling inside her. Hope, fear, doubt. Emma grabbed her hand. "Mommy, you always say anything is possible." Lisa swallowed hard. For the first time in years, she wanted to believe it. Lisa stood in front of the bakery the next morning, gripping the keys James had given her. The small shop had a cozy charm, with a faded sign that read Sweet Haven Bakery. It smelled of flour and sugar, but it was clear the place had seen better days. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The previous owner, an elderly woman named Margaret, greeted her with a kind smile. "James told me about you," she said. I'm glad he found someone who truly cares about baking. Lisa smiled nervously. I hope I can do this. Margaret patted her arm. You'll do just fine, dear. The first week was overwhelming. Lisa arrived before sunrise, learning the recipes Margaret had used for years. She burned a few loaves, mixed up the measurements, and almost cried when the register jammed during a rush. But she didn't give up. She spent every spare moment studying business basics, experimenting with new flavors, and greeting every customer with warmth. Emma helped too, drawing signs that said "best cookies ever," and handing out samples with a big smile. One afternoon, James stopped by. He watched as Lisa moved behind the counter, her apron dusted with flour, chatting with a regular customer. How's it going? He asked when she finally had a moment. Lisa wiped her hands on a towel. It's hard, she admitted, but I love it. James nodded. Good, because this isn't about making me money, it's about proving to yourself that you can do it. Lisa met his gaze. For the first time, she truly believed him. Weeks turned into months. Lisa poured everything into the bakery, offering fresh baked goods, warm coffee, and a welcoming atmosphere. Word spread. Customers returned. Sales grew. One evening, as she locked up, she turned to Emma and whispered, "We did it." Emma grinned. Does that mean we can have muffins every day? Lisa laughed, hugging her daughter. Maybe not every day. James watched from across the street, smiling. He had taken a chance on Lisa, and she had proven she was worth it. 6 months later, the bakery wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The once quiet shop was now filled with laughter, the hum of conversation, and the smell of warm bread and cinnamon. Customers lined up early for fresh pastries, and Lisa knew most of them by name. She had done it. One evening, after the last customer left, Lisa stood behind the counter, looking around the shop. The walls were decorated with Emma's colorful drawings. A new sign above the register read, Sweet Haven, owned by Lisa and Emma. It still didn't feel real. The door swung open and James walked in. He glanced around, nodding in approval. Looks like business is good. Lisa smiled. Better than I ever imagined. James pulled an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the counter. Then it's time. Lisa frowned. Time for what? James slid the envelope toward her. For you to own this place. Completely. Her breath caught. She slowly opened it, her hands shaking. Inside were the official ownership papers, signed and ready. No debt, no fine print, just hers. Lisa looked up, eyes filled with emotion. I don't know what to say. James smiled. Say you'll keep going. And that someday, when you're in a position to help someone else, you'll do it. Tears welled in Lisa's eyes. She reached out and shook his hand. I promise. A year later, Lisa stood behind the counter as a young woman nervously approached. She was tired, struggling, just as Lisa had been. Lisa listened to her story, nodding. Then she smiled and pulled out an apron. Would you like a job? She asked. The woman's eyes widened. Really? Lisa nodded. Someone once gave me a chance. It changed my life. Now, I'd like to do the same. As the woman put on the apron, Emma peeked over the counter and grinned. Welcome to Sweet Haven. From across the street, James Carter watched through the window. He smiled, knowing that the cycle of kindness had just begun again. And Lisa? She was no longer just surviving, she was thriving.